And now on to our program. Our 2022 breakfast series continues with a discussion about construction. No challenges in this segment, obviously. Rising costs, supply chain issues are all going to be tackled. We have been fortunate to be able to assemble an expert panel that is ready to tackle an important topic at this unique moment in our industry. Our moderator today is Andrew Laurie. Andrew is a principal at Rain City Industrial, where he oversees business development and strategic alliances with their customers and real estate partners. Andrew will moderate today's panel with representatives from development, construction, and leasing. Joining Andrew are, and as I introduce them, perhaps they'll wander up and take a seat, Byron Chard, President and CEO of Chard Development. Byron oversees the day-to-day operations and strategic direction of the organization, including acquisitions, product mix, and sourcing debt and capital partners. Reid, President of Kindred Construction. Bryan leads Kindred's overall strategic direction and helps the firm achieve positive and consistent growth in the industry. Cavanaugh, Vice President of Development at Cadillac Fairview. Matthew is responsible for the entitlement and execution of Cadillac Fairview's real estate development program here in Western Canada. And finally, Craig Enns, Vice President, Area Manager with EllisDon. Craig is currently responsible for the direction of all professional staff, operation, and client relations for EllisDon operations here in British Columbia. And now, without further ado, I will turn the microphone over to Mr. Andrew Laurie. Thank you, gentlemen. Andrew.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? So today we have a very, very, very contentious topic to talk about, and that's the rising cost of construction, inflation rates, and supply chain. I'm really excited about the panel we have. Each one of them is an expert in their own field. And the beauty of this panel is each one of them has a very different perspective and can offer a variety of different views of the same subject. So I'm really excited to get into it with these guys and figure out what's going on out there and strategies to deal with it. First thing I want to start off with is a quick stat deck to show you guys where we're at right now in the construction industry. This is from the BC Construction Association Spring 2022 stat pack, so it's pretty recent. The construction industry in British Columbia is a $134 billion industry. That's the value of construction right now. That's on every one of those arrows, whether up or down, is based on a 5-year trend. So that's up 79%. That's a big number. 23 billion of that is the contribution of construction to BC's GDP. So construction is a very important part in driving our economy. Number of construction companies is 26,262. That's up 11%. Here's where the numbers get a little bit dicey and the problems are starting to show themselves. The number of construction trade workers in BC's labor force is 171,470. That's down 5% on a 5-year trend, and that's continuing to drop. The average annual wage of a construction employee is up 14% at $66,591,000. That number seems low to me, but we'll dig into that. Construction opportunities due to retirement. This is another staggering stat. It's up 4%, and that's continuing to grow. As people are starting to retire, there is not the opportunities or the people to come in and backfill those jobs. And the cream of the crop, guys who've spent their entire life learning the trades, it's tough to backfill those positions, especially with limited talent coming out. So there's got to be a real drive on making sure there's mentorship programs in place. 5,653 construction jobs unfulfilled right now in BC because of the shortages. Here's a positive stat. 5.7% of the construction labor force is female, and that's up 24%. So that's a very encouraging stat as the females are drawn towards the industry and more opportunities there. I think that's going to be a real solution for the industry moving forward. So that's where we're at with the construction. To get into the panel, I wanted to give each one of these guys an opportunity to explain who they are, what they do, and how it relates to the topic, so you guys will understand the context they're working with. So I'll pass it off to Craig Enns first, who is Vice President and Western Area Manager for EllisDon. Go ahead.
I don't know who's seen the movie Office Space in the 90s, but when they ask what you do here, what exactly would you say you do here? I struggle to answer that sometimes, but generally, anything bad that happens in BC with EllisDon is my fault, and anything good that happens is because we've got a good team. More specifically, I'm responsible for all the profit and loss for our buildings group in BC. So anything from ongoing execution to safety to client relationships to new work to contracts falls under my purview. We've been out here 15 years. I've been out here the whole time, and for those who do or don't know the EllisDon BC story, it's we're big in Canada. We weren't big in BC, and it's been a pretty fun run in the last 15 years. And
Is that my feedback, or?
and that's me.
Stand back here.
So Matthew Cavanaugh, I'm at CF. I work on the development team there, and I definitely share your struggle of what exactly do you do here. When I try to tell my friends what I do, who aren't in real estate, I tell them I'm in real estate development. And they say, "Oh, then you're an architect." No, I'm not an architect. "Oh, then you build the buildings." Well, no, I don't build them. So they pretty much say inevitably, "What exactly do you do here?" But my day-to-day is generally working on concept design, coming up with kind of opportunities either on new properties or within our existing portfolio, developing those projects, developing the sort of initial design, initial concept design, working them through entitlement to getting them approved within our own company, and at that point I'm actually able to pass them off. We have a dedicated PM team who takes them into construction, and I'll still work with the PM team through their construction into completion, but I actually don't know why I'm up here, because we have a construction team, so I don't know what I'm going to tell you guys.
We're having trouble finding people to say yes.
Thought I said no.
You did, twice.
Excuse me, my name is Bryan Reid. I'm the president of Kindred Construction. My day-to-day has me responsible for the overall corporate strategy and direction of Kindred's business. That involves primarily communication with and amongst the staff throughout our entire office, and then of course externally as well. The primary responsibility of client engagement and business development falls to me. And then with that, I guess how that would relate to what we're seeing in today's market is that it's just even more incumbent upon those that have that level of responsibility to have very consistent, frequent communication because of how volatile everything has become. That is me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Good morning. Byron, Chard Development, President CEO of family-based Vancouver developer. We work in the City of Vancouver, City of Victoria, and the North Shore mostly. I'd like to say that we've diversified our assets while staying in the same geographical region given the challenges at City Hall. Chard currently has 12 projects, 2,000 homes, 500,000 square feet of office and hotel under development. We work with a variety of partners. I oversee the company from sourcing and acquisition all the way to property management at the end. Fantastic team. I'd also agree, don't know why I'm up here versus our construction team, but here to oversee our complete strategy and look forward to getting to the discussion of some of the initiatives that we're taking. And I'd say at the very beginning, this starts at DD, ultimately looking at our construction costs.
Again, you said yes.
My mistake.
All right, I'm just gonna run through these stats real quick, and then we'll actually get into the conversation. So that's construction. Here's supply chain. This is what's called a global freight cost index. So it basically shows the cost of shipping a 40-foot container pre-pandemic versus to the end of March 2022. So right there, January, it was about $1,720 American dollars to ship a 40-foot container as the index. That peaked out around September 2021, right at the height of the pandemic, at $10,361 US dollars, and now it's sort of leveling off at about $7,600 as of March 2022. So those costs are huge, and contributions to that rise was all of a sudden the mass need for PPE equipment, the pressure that put onto the global supply chain. The global supply chain itself is a very dynamic thing that one major event can take it out of place, and in this case, the pandemic caused many major events: labor shortages, port closures, extreme demand for use of it, as well as lack of shipping containers. It turned out once things were shipped out of the markets, they were not being shipped back full. As such, these containers were just being stacked up, and because it wasn't worth the cost to ship empty containers back. That's a sort of a macro level. To go micro on supply chain. The World Bank issued a report recently, and I just found it quite interesting. It rated the ports globally, 370 ports. Vancouver ranked, this is on the administrative side. There was 2 ranking systems, but just to bring some context to it, this is on the administrative side. 368 out of 370 was Vancouver. Prince Rupert was 344 out of 370. Seattle was 336 out of 370. Tacoma, 345 out of 370. Long Beach, 369. And Los Angeles, 370 out of 370. So the Pacific Western region is really underperforming when it comes to this. So the fact that we're not able to move goods through any part of the Western Seaboard is having a huge effect on how we're all doing business and what we're seeing out there. As the Stats Canada relates, the current wait time for a freighter when it comes in, I mean, they're typically sitting out there in the bay for 3 weeks until they can come in and unload their gear. And at that time, I learned something called the dwell time, and a dwell time is when a container's actually emptied and it's on the truck ready to go. The average dwell time for the port of Vancouver was 2.9 days in February 2021. That jumped to over double in February 22. So things are sitting out there longer, and then they're sitting in the port longer, and there's a ton of reasons for it, and hopefully these guys can put some insight into it. Last but not least, I just wanted to just give you a couple of things that we've learned along the way with construction industries and costs of things. Steel joists, dock doors, HVAC units, glass panels, and drywall. I'm not gonna go through this, but you guys can read it as we're talking, but the reality is everything's up, like steel joists, 110% price increase and a 16-week lead time to 24-week lead time. That's insane. I mean, that's just hard to do business in. So those are the stats. That's where we're at. Now let's get into the actual conversation here. This is for the entire panel. We'll start with Craig because he's closer to me. And how has this environment changed the way you guys are doing business at EllisDon? Like, what have you had to do to keep up with this?
Well,
it's a broad question.
It is.
Yeah.
It's changed how we do business. I mean, the risk transfer in any job we do is immense. Mm-hmm. And in some of those models, all the decision, purchasing power, when we go is on EllisDon. In the more classic procurement model, an RFP, budget for a year, IFT, and build, that model doesn't work very well right now. It's almost useless because in that model where you do 3 budgets and you're updating your budget to make sure your design's on track and it's hitting your pro forma, after which you issue an IFT set of drawings, buy and build. Right now, between each budget update, you could have done value engineering and reduced the size of the building, but in that time you've escalated yourself up and the building costs 10% more, which is real in what we're seeing. So in how we do business, if I were to pick one thing, we've pulled in our design build world into some of the commercial side and the more classic procurement models, which it takes away those stop gates that we often see in the ICI world or the commercial world, where you're doing checks on your pro forma along the way.
When you say ICI, what do you mean?
Institutional and commercial. With a private owner, we often see those stop gates. You're checking budgets, you're adjusting the design and before you move on. In the design build world, we know we're going before we even have a schematic set of drawings. So when you know you're going, it allows you to make decisions earlier. In the classic model, you're not buying steel to IFT. In the design build world, we do a fast track model where we're bringing this into our private clients. If they know they're going, we're going to procure steel and dirt before we've even hit schematic design. It mitigates immensely a lot of the escalation you're seeing through that design stage. And it also commits you a lot earlier.
So yeah, so what do you require for you guys to go out and sort of do that early procurement? Because there is then some risk, but I guess everyone's in the project then. So what's required at that point?
It's trust and commitment.
Yeah.
Right. And those are fundamental to any good relationship. But even more so now, waiting is death in terms of cost. So when you know you're going, I'm jumping questions, but we're even seeing times where we're indexing prices of sub-trades between the owners ourselves and the trades. We've got a job right now where our client is building mass timber. We're not going to put mass timber in the building for another 18 months. We're awarding that contract in the next few weeks, and we're indexing it to the price of fiber. We've got some unit rates to put blocks around it. What it does is it solves 2 things. One, it gets you a spot line. So the supply chain itself was broken, right? There's less capacity to build your steel or wood or whatever, so it gets you in line. And then if you have a good relationship and a good contract model where you've got the indexing right, you can work together as an owner, builder, and subtrade on when best to buy. Like wood's a good example that's gone up, down, up, down, up, down. With that supplier, we can decide when to buy that wood on that, in that curve. And we're in line, and we've hedged against escalation there.
So is index another term for getting your crystal ball out, or?
Index, specifically in that model, we've tied it to futures or to the lumber supply price.
Okay, got it.
And we work together to decide when to buy. And in that case, it's worked very well.
Good. Matt?
Well, as one of those ICI clients, I just asked Craig to do all the stuff he just said, mostly.
All right, sounds good, Brian.
No, for us, we really, to kind of piggyback a little bit on what you said, we've seen a very, very marked increase of the value of time. And any delay now, a few years ago, delays are frustrating. Delays do cost you money, but today, delays really cost you money. And just for instance, we have one small one-tower project, and we've just delayed it out about 10 months, and we're looking at well over $1 million a month in escalation. And that just means any little delay is absolutely costing you. And I really don't feel that our revenue side is increasing at the same rate. So we need to be, on our side, very mindful of how quickly we're getting through the city's process, or how quickly we're getting through our own design process. And I won't steal Byron's thunder because we had a quick chat about this before, but another thing we're looking to do is purposeful design, and that's trying to stay away from looking at a value engineering design change and trying to get ahead of it and really address things in a thoughtful, mindful manner up front.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there anything you guys can do about the feedback back there? It's kind of distracting me. All right, well, I'll push through it. I'm just wondering if it's the metal plate in my head or if it's I'm the only one hearing it. Anyhow, did any of this, like the current environment I just read yesterday that you guys are going on spec on Falls Creek there, next to the station, does that have anything to do with
that we're going on spec? Well, I don't have a design yet. I'd love to go on spec. We don't have a permit, so if you can help me out with that,
I cannot.
We'll go ahead. No problem.
Did I not just read that in the BIB yesterday though? That
Sure. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyhow, all right. Brian.
Yeah, I'd piggyback off of what Craig mentioned there initially. I think that what this has done is it's made us evaluate the approach that we're taking contractually, whereas the design bid build process or a modified general contract where you're CM at risk and jumping into a fixed price, that model is proving challenging to make sure that better now?
Should have known better.
So I think that what we're doing is we're evaluating how to contractually approach the risk. Construction is an industry that's fraught with risk in the best of times. And so doing what we can to make sure that that is a shared approach and an understood and collaborative approach is something that has become even more so important. And that goes all the way down the line with how we're approaching our contractual relationships with trades and then consultants in the design build world as well. Outside of what we're doing from a actual contractual standpoint, I think part of how our business has changed is our types of procurement and how we're looking to evaluate which projects to actually chase. Whereas in the past, is it a project that we're capable of? Is it one that we want to do? Does it coincide with what we're looking to do corporately with our growth? A very significant point of analysis now is the project viable? Will it be built? When will it be built? There is no ability to take somebody's word at, don't worry, it will go. That it cannot, everybody believes that their projects will start. We've had to be very mindful of finite resources, as with every company, to make sure that they're properly allocated to places that a project will start when it's supposed to, so that we're not left scrambling to backfill with a bit of a dog. So it's definitely something that's adjusted how we're looking at work to take away that risk of us relying on something starting when it would have typically.
So are you saying no to stuff now that you typically wouldn't have said no to, let's say, 2 years ago?
Yeah,
So what are you saying no to then? Like, what's
so
an example?
Kindred's work is predominantly on the mixed use and multifamily space. We're a mid-sized builder, so projects up to about 400 units or so. And the market-driven condo landscape right now is challenging.
Yeah.
And so for us to rely that a developer that's got a concrete condo project at 12 stories is going to be a viable project in this landscape is challenging. And I empathize with the situation that they find themselves in. It's difficult to make a project pencil when they bought the dirt 4 years ago. And so for us to rely on that, we probably have to buffer ourselves by making sure that we have other project types that allow us to be somewhat diversified. So whether that's an industrial or institutional project or a non-market rental, it's just something that we've had to look to make sure that we're allowing ourselves that flexibility.
So is there like a case now where someone who is going to build and stratify and build a residential, is it more beneficial for them to look at a rental as opposed to selling it at this stage?
Well, that's above my pay grade. I just work for those
I was
guys.
hoping you would.
I think that what we are seeing is that they're all delayed. Nobody has pushed go for a project that was supposed to start for us either this summer or fall. So we're getting into procurement on those at this point in a typical process and a typical time frame. But we're having sales centers delayed. We're having the start of constructions delayed and pushed out. And that's for a much more modest project scale than what Craig would be dealing with. And so if we're seeing a 10, 15, 20% increase over the last year and a half on a project value of 60 million, like God forbid what you're dealing with on a project that's 600 million.
Can I give you an anecdote? And
Yeah.
This was a recent example of a client we're pursuing, and we're talking about fees, and we're negotiating, and our pre-construction fees were X, and they said, well, can't you do that for free? And I said, absolutely, once we sign a construction contract. He said, but we don't think we're actually going to build it. And I said, exactly.
You never say that. You never say that part out loud.
I'm paraphrasing, right?
Yeah.
But the discussion was, of course, we'll donate that back once we sign a construction contract. And then when you really get into it, you see the hesitation or the reality of where going wasn't there.
Craig, I don't see the issue with that question.
So Byron, just on to, I mean, do you sort of see things a bit differently in the asset classes, and maybe you can put some insight to that as far as what, residential renting versus?
Sure, absolutely. So, as I've said, we diversify through asset class. So I have we're about 1,400 rental units now in our pipeline, about 600 condo, and then 500,000 square feet of office and hotel. So we've definitely seen a variety of movement in different asset classes. But I think the key word here that you've heard from all my colleagues up here is confidence. We need to provide confidence to the contractor, to our end purchasers, to our partners. It is confidence in the market, confidence that we're going to deliver. And so that is, I'd say, our number one priority as a developer. When we're looking to structure my team internally, I think number one, so first off, I'm an accountant. I like numbers, analytics. And so we've brought procurement in-house from a management standpoint of tracking when are goods going onto the boat, when are they getting manufactured, where is it on the tank, and then when does it actually land in the port. And so we're tracking the movement of our goods a lot closer and also trying to leverage the scale so that we can benefit all of our projects across the board. And so this even comes to now we're talking to TK Shipping. Okay, how can we be actually talking to different players in the supply chain and build that confidence up and down, I'd say, the vertical integration of our company. As I was just in Toronto yesterday, and I spent half a day meeting with RBC's capital markets team, looking at derivative solutions of how can we be trying to lock in lumber, lock in our interest rates, lock in steel. And steel was a very interesting discussion of how can we mitigate that to provide that confidence, number one, of locking in our pro forma costs, and then passing it down to give that confidence to our GCs that we are that we're going to deliver. And it's also working with our lenders is, I'd say, a huge aspect of what I do day to day to ensure that we're going to have the financing there because they do make up 70 to 90% of our capital stack. And so it means we need our lenders at the table also having this discussion. That means larger portions of our financings have to have sections for pre-purchasing. And some of that pre-purchasing has to have room for deposits. Let's give our general contractors that flexibility that initiative so we can go and procure that. We're now writing in our pro formas warehousing spaces. So again, as my colleagues have discussed, give them the flexibility to go pre-purchase and make sure that we have that warehouse space available. How can I use some of our other properties that we have in pre-development where we might have some vacant CRUs, for example, because we're developing that site in 2 years, and utilize that for the benefit of the project under construction. Of course, there's rent paid to each other, to our different partnerships, to keep everything at arm's length, but it all comes down to how can we leverage where we are as a company and give confidence to the market. That is absolutely critical for what I do day to day.
So to just follow up real quick. So we talked about this global supply chain, and especially when it gets in the port and all the delays. One of the notes about the Vancouver port was the lack of transparency and information. So how are you tracking it once that arrives into here, and how are you getting any sort of transparency from the port because then it seems like it's still months away once it even gets here?
Relationships.
Yeah. Okay.
At the end of the day, it's the best part of this industry is the handshakes that we work off of and the people we meet day to day. And fortunately for me, some of our investors are also board members on the port, and so it's how do we continue just to have conversations with, okay, this is the connection I'm looking to make because I want to ask questions here. I want to dig into this aspect. Let our team ask the questions of how we can get that. So it comes down to relationships at the end of the day.
I think one thing to piggyback off of what Byron was saying there, what he was mentioning as far as the involvement from a procurement standpoint with lumber or steel is atypical of what would have been taking place 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. There is no longer sides of the table. There has to be cohesion in how people are working together because you can leverage each other's strengths and skill sets, and the ability to utilize something like that makes our job significantly easier. And so you're absolutely right. It is that very blended model. There is no longer that behind the veil, we're doing the construction, you send us checks once a month. It is very much a collaborative effort, even in a very standard CCDC2. Like, I don't think there's such a thing as a non-transparent approach that can be successful in construction right now.
I completely agree, and like what we ask out of our GCs is we want open book tenders. We want to see what portion is sitting there as labor, material, profit, and we want to lock in that profit number and that labor, and we might ride on the material side, and we'll ride that risk with you. But we want that transparency, so if it goes up, it goes down. We want to see that number or that savings. We don't want 50 cents in the dollar. We want to see that savings directly on the material.
And that's what I was talking about when I was referring to the classic procurement model of bid, buy later. That approach, it's always been helpful. It's always been beneficial to work together, buy early, secure deposits. It's just underlined right now. Like when you see, you get price increases every month. Like another one came out for glass. I'm sure everyone has seen it in the last 2 days. When you see those increases every month, the fact that you locked in your glazing or your lumber supply 6 months ago, you've hedged 30%, and that's a real number on that curtain wall for a specific job right now, because we worked with the owner, we secured a supplier, we locked it in, and they're paying 30% less today because of that open book approach.
I need to make sure the GC is going to be there. And so, yes, we might be signing fixed price contracts, but if you have a sub-trade that walks, and you're going to be, we don't want to see you under the water. And yes, I always like to say we have strong legal agreements, but those go in the drawer. We're there to get a project done, and timeline is everything, and we recognize that when working with our GCs, and we want to be at the table finding solutions, how can we leverage our weight in the conversation as well? How can we leverage our partners' weights? For example, and like in discussions with one of our institutions, how can I sit here and leverage what they have on their partners sitting in Alberta and Ontario as well, and we all benefit from it. Let's put our numbers together so when we're buying the faucets, maybe we can save an extra dollar or so and put the pressure down the chain here of scale. And where can we be storing it? Where can we be using our different resources? Again, it's pure collaboration and trust.
Now, when you were back in Toronto and talking to the banks, and it's kind of for all of you guys because you guys are all dealing with the financial side of things, how is that conversation going now versus where, let's say, pre-pandemic, and the types of things that maybe you're queuing in on now where you never would have when you were back east? I guess start with you, and then I want to hear from Matt as well on the entitlement and development side and underwriting. So.
Sure. So, and I find lenders are starting to get pickier of the developers that they're looking to go with. And so it's also providing the confidence to our lenders. I'd say they're looking to pick horses that they know are going to build. And so I'd say that's, and the second one, they're trying to figure out their placement of capital. So we're working with our lenders a lot earlier on in the process of saying, this is what we're looking for. These are the pre-sale requirements that we need. This is our underwriting to our rental buildings. Are you going to be there at this tier? We always like to tier our financing, so normally it's between 3 to 4 different hurdles on pre-sales. We raise our capital, of course, to tier 1, which we could be going into the ground here on 10 to 20% pre-sales on a condo. And we work with our lenders to structure our debt that way. Again, it's all confidence to our GCs. So I would say overall, lenders are becoming more sophisticated on the issues of construction, but they're coming to the table. They get it. And they're here to get projects complete, find the room for that pre-purchasing, find the room for those deposits, for what do those pre-purchasing terms look like. There used to be 10 criteria that we had to meet, from insurance to who's checking it to where is it stored, of whose place. It used to not be allowed to be stored in the subtrade's hands, for example. They had to be in a facility owned by us or the GC. That's changed. So they're coming to the table of how can they help on the supply chain as well.
Yeah, I'd say we're definitely noticing a lot more flexibility as well. I sit in a slightly different chair in that we're pension backed as well. So when we go to the banks, it's usually not a confidence issue. They're pretty well aware of our balance sheet and that's not a concern. What we really have trouble with is our, not trouble, that's the unfair word, but where we find a lot of hurdles right now is with our owner, with hitting the internal pension hurdle rates. And it's becoming more and more difficult as the pension looks and sees other opportunities, as we see inflation increase and as we see sort of all these other doors opening up with other opportunities as the economy really starts to pick up. We're finding that it's harder and harder for us to come up with projects with rising cost world, rising revenue, sure, but not to the same extent that the costs are rising, and it's harder and harder for us to keep the attention of our owner and ensure that we are getting capital deployed to us. So we're finding that the banks are still very willing partners. They're willing to listen. They're willing to work, and we just need to sort of pay attention to our own side of things and ensure that when we're really underwriting this, we can work with our owner and make sure that we have the capital available. And it is getting tougher and tougher. And one thing that really keeps me up at night is as these interest rates rise, we're seeing a lot of cap rate pressure to rise, and that is just making it harder and harder and harder to underwrite these things. So not only do you have costs coming up, you have an IRR that's just getting absolutely blown to pieces by increasing cap rates, and it's making things very difficult to.
So how are you dealing with like a big project that started a long time ago, like Richmond Center, let's say, where it was probably underwritten a while ago, 5 years ago, and now you're sort of coming into where you're building now. So what's being done internally to help mitigate?
So those smart guys who work on our project management team who I was talking about before, they saw this coming and they really got ahead of it, and we did a ton of procurement very early. Yeah. We locked in roughly 80% of our risk years ago. Yeah, about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And
so you've just got sea cans somewhere full of material? Is that
we've just been ahead of the game, ahead of the curve at every point. No, not we, I shouldn't say that. Our PM team has been ahead of the game, ahead of the curve at every point, trying to lock in these costs because they saw this coming. And we've definitely seen price pressures, don't get me wrong, but we are still very much above water on our pro forma right now, and we're pretty excited about that project. Right now, most of my days focusing on Richmond Phase 2. That one's a little scarier because we haven't locked anything in. We're still in early days of DD design, and we're looking at a similar scale, another probably 1,200 odd units, and prices are going way up, and we're sort of trying to find a way to design this and get it ready in sort of a procedure that doesn't really get us into a position where we've designed this beautiful building we love that people want to buy into, but we just can't afford. And that's something that is, I kind of hinted at a little bit before. We're looking at design. How can we design this in a way that is going to be resilient to cost and risk increases? And that's really something that we've been focused on, is not just coming up with an architectural design that looks great, that works, that is efficient, but also that is resilient to cost increases.
This might be a tangent, but where the supply chain is actually broken and it ruins all of this pre-planning and early procurement and buying early is another anecdote, but it's a real example. Reinforcing steel right now is a crazy issue to deal with. We have a project and we have a supplier that issued a PO, had steel on a barge on its way to North America. They were phoned by the supplier saying, we're sending it to somewhere else in South Asia. We'll ship you a new barge in March, and we'll tell you the rate at when it's shipped.
How do they do that? Like,
So that's where the supply chain is literally broken at times.
but was there not paperwork and deposits?
Absolutely.
So-
And so this is the tangent part. That is a subcontractor in BC who I have a fixed price contract with. He's 50% complete by cost.
Yeah.
He's now facing a point where his deals are not being honored. And that's not my problem, but it's becoming my problem because he's now facing at these cost increases insolvency, to be frank, to honor his original price. Because that supply chain broke at a certain spot,
Yeah.
he can't rely on his previous agreements.
And how is that viewed just from a, and it's not my problem, it's your problem, but it is your problem, and
Yeah,
I don't think
exactly.
there's a sorry about your luck clause in the
No.
agreement, so.
I'll tell you when we're through it. To be
Yeah,
honest with
I mean,
you.
that's really interesting, because that is scary, that you
Yeah.
have done all the right things, you've procured, you've locked it in, you've paid your deposits, and now they're just saying, no, we're diverting it to, someone we like more, because we can get more.
When
I
you
mean,
look
that's
at-
scary if they can start backing out.
The scale of the increases now is such that no matter how honorable and good of a trade you are, you can't absorb a 20% glass increase overnight and still honor your price. Those margins just don't exist. So that's where the worry of insolvencies in my world come in, as someone who holds the risk on fixed price subcontracts. That's the risk I see.
Okay. So, just for the panel then, we've already covered off early procurement. That's a good, strong strategy. But how are you managing? I mean, early procurement, you can see where it fails in situations like that. So how are you managing your guys' clients? How are you sort of, I get it, we're planning, we're early procuring, but like when someone calls an audible on you like that, what is the process to go back to, it's your steel guy, but you're ultimately responsible for the project. So what are you saying to your client to help mitigate that conversation? I know maybe you don't want to speak in real term, but
Yeah.
what would you say in a hypothetical?
I'm trying to get in front of it. So
Yeah.
the most recent one was glass. So Guardian Glass released a letter on June 14th increasing clear glass by 40% and tinted by 25% effective June 20th. I got the letter. I called every other supplier I know. I heard all the information about it. Everyone locally followed suit. And Dave, you're going to get a call. I've got calls into other major clients saying, FYI, one project we have on the island, I'm calling the client, they have the ability to buy their glass today.
Yeah.
So this is going to tell me whether, if they want to go, this is a chance to mitigate a significant loss in the glazing. So it's discussions, it's early communication.
Okay. And then Bryan and Byron, what are you guys saying to the clients that you're dealing with when all the early procurement fails and you just get a call on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon saying stuff's gone wrong? What are you doing? I mean,
Getting really good at apologizing.
yeah, fair enough.
I think that
Marriage prepared me for that.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be a sense of comfort with who your client group is. If there's a level of relationship and understanding there, I think that much like Craig mentioned with respect to insolvency with trades, general contractors can't absorb a 40% cost increase over the course of 2 years either. And so while that is offset by making sure the trades honor their obligations, if there's things that happen in advance of a contractual responsibility, then there needs to be an understanding that contractors can't just be a good guy and make it work. And
Yeah.
if there's something that, if there's a level of relationship with your client group, that's a conversation that's easy to have, truthfully. It's challenging and not always comfortable. They don't receive poor news as well as they would positive. But it's something that you need to do. The best time to share bad news is immediately. And so when that news is shared with us, it's an immediate response to the client group. It's immediate discussions with alternate options. And then in a certain situation, I guess you're providing yourself as much flexibility as possible. And so while early engagement with trades is great if that procurement works, you also want to make sure that you're giving yourself a bit of support and backup if something were to fail, so that there's other shops that you can go to hopefully offset some of those concerns.
So I'm on the other side of the table on this. I'm the one who gets the call of the increase of the issues on site. And so, number one, I like to operate internally and externally of no surprises. We want to know right away, and so let us be at the table. I don't want to hear that you found out about this a month ago and you're only telling us now and we're in a bigger hole to dig out of. So I operate no surprises. That's a key philosophy internally at Chard, and then with anyone that we work with. I would say when we get that call, it's coming to the table with them, of having that discussion. Let us also try to help be part of that solution. And of course, it's about risk transfer, I think is a word I heard earlier. And where does that sit? And what does it mean to the project? Where does the delay sit corresponding to that? Because obviously we're going to look at our entire business plan on the impacts. And what does that look like while staying within the confines of the contract? And so for us, that's where we want to be at the table trying to find that solution, because time is everything for us as well. We have our debt ticking away on us. We have our obligations with our purchasers. And so we are at the table there trying to find a solution of what does it mean to our timeline and the impacts.
Yeah, I think that what we've seen more impactful than cost increases, while we haven't been immune to it, we haven't seen anything that's been catastrophic to any of our projects or things that we haven't been able to absorb internally. Truthfully, what we have seen is that time crunch being the most significant thing that we're all trying to combat. The price, there is the opportunity to offset prices in certain points. There's alternative trades, but if something's unable to get to site, or if that is a looming problem, that's been the most critical thing that we've been looking to address.
How are you guys seeing your timing lines of your projects these days?
So I would say first off, it's like I look at Vancouver, and for example, one of our sites, we're dealing with the concrete strike. And so what's the impact here down, the trickle down of that strike? How can we get enough concrete? I only have to do a P1 and the first level after that I'm wood, but so how can I get enough here to keep our project moving, not impact the next subtrade coming on? Because of course construction's a bit of a dance of the next subtrade in line, and so it's how do we make sure that we continue that timeline within the project. But I would say overall we underwrite its sensitivities on the interest rate and how that impacts our total performer on the timeline. We maybe underwrite with a few extra months incorporated into it because we know the issues that we are having on site, and to try to be conservative when we are approaching our partners, and so that we can be delivering what we have promised them through the business plan.
Yeah, I think that even prior to what we're seeing recently, construction seems to be the only industry in the world that was acceptable to take longer now to do something 10 years ago. It seems to have just not advanced the way that it should have, whether that's a labor issue or building codes making things more challenging to construct is another panel that I'm not nearly intelligent enough to be a part of, but it's doing what we can to offset those potential schedule impacts. The reality is that they're going to be there with the environment that we're in right now. And so it's getting out in front of it by providing realistic contingency plans and contingencies within your schedule. And so if out of the gate you and the owner are on the same page that it's a 24-month build, but in order to satisfy those requirements, you're going to tell your lender it's 28. That gives you a bit of caution and understanding, and it's better to deliver in 25 if you're saying 28 than 25 if you say 24.
Are you seeing like outside dates set in these contracts getting pushed up on?
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm assuming everyone's so far down the line, they're prepared to have a discussion about pushing that date. People aren't going to walk away yet.
Yeah, I know that.
Fair to say?
Owners obviously have their disclosure statements and stuff that they
Yeah.
need to amend, and obligations with tenants. But as Byron was alluding to earlier, having that early dialogue immediately, like if you've got a concrete delay and your site's shuttered for 2 months, you can't recapture that. It's not like you just lean on mechanical and everybody else to just work Saturdays.
Yeah.
It's an unfortunate thing. Like that schedule slip happened. So what are we doing to make sure that we don't lose any more? And what are you putting in place at the beginning to make sure everybody's aware of those potential situations?
It's a classic plan for the worst, hope for the best these days, and It's absolutely both. It's a partnership, and we've been saying that a lot because it's the contractor and the client both planning for the worst and hoping for the best. We're putting time into our pro forma. We're putting extra contingency into our pro forma because as much as you can try to mitigate some of these issues, there's absolutely nothing we can do about a lot of these issues that are occurring right now. If you're worried about the supply chain, you source locally. Well, then look what happened last year with the floods. Yeah. You know, you source from Canada, and all of a sudden you can't even get things in from Canada. I'm sure we all in the room have horror stories about trying to get a sprinkler permit. I mean, these things are completely out of our control. There's nothing you can do when this sort of thing breaks down. So really all you can do is plan for the worst and then do your absolute best to sort of look ahead, try to anticipate some of these issues, try to mitigate these issues as best you can, and just insulate yourself. It's kind of a crummy answer, but
what does the contingency look like now, though? Like 10% in the
Huge.
bottom line, or like, yeah, so like what's this contingency percentage that we're looking at now?
It's really going to depend on you know, sort of a number of factors.
And does each line item now have a contingency as opposed to just an overall under the line contingency?
We would look at it on each line item, would
Yeah.
have a different contingency, and then we would apply a total contingency as a developer as well. And so there's contingency on contingency right now, and it's brutal because it absolutely, once again, it comes back to blowing up your pro forma. The IRRs are getting crushed.
Yeah.
Your costs are getting crushed. The only thing keeping us alive right now has been revenue increases. You see a lot of net rent increases in commercial. We have seen the cost of pre-sales go up, but that can only go up so far, and then we're going to hit an inflection point where we are at a place where we cannot rely on revenues covering our butts anymore, and we've got to look at you know, how do we get these costs down, or
So
at least stabilize
we
them.
cap projects then, say, all right, we've built out the parquet, let's put a plug in it for now and wait and see how this levels off. Is that where we're going with this?
I sure hope it doesn't come to that, but I would be shocked if we don't see a few projects that either get capped, delayed, et cetera, over the next year or so. There's just way too much upward pressure right now on costs.
So you said you were like now actively looking at changing, you know, the materials you're using to stuff that's more readily available, and that's one of your strategies. You know, if you're using different materials, or you're technically changing the look and character and form of a building, does that mean you're having to go back and deal with permit issues again and DP issues? And
Well, no, because like I said, we're trying not to do this on a late stage basis. We're trying not to value engineer after the fact. We're trying to approach this up front and hit it at the CD or DD phase and take a look at what we think is going to be the most resilient building material. What is going to be the least risky way to build this thing? And you're always looking at the least risky way of building something from just a straight cost value. But now we're kind of taking a second lens and looking at that of, you know, it's going to cost X amount, but also we're a little concerned about the risk of, you know, say steel joists. I mean, I don't build with steel joists, but that's 110% is a pretty ugly number. We would look at that now and say, you know, maybe we want to look at this at the DD phase, try and find a different way to build this thing that we are a little bit more confident with, and not wait until we get to a point where this thing has been costed, where we maybe even have a tenant lined up and now we're underwater. We're trying to look at that ahead of time.
I would say further on that, like it's, for our GCs, we need to be making sure we give really good drawings. And so it's, number one, we're doing a lot more peer reviews with consultants. So we're getting constructural, we're getting a different firm to peer review what our structural engineers said. How is it, are we over engineering these buildings? And so what does this look like? We're using 3D CAD makers on most of our projects. So we're building our buildings before we actually give them, we're building them with a computer. Every subtrade comes in, and so we can find the conflicts. How can we help reduce the change orders on our sides? Because that's where we know we don't want to see those from our GC. So how can we get ahead to provide really good working drawings and a tender set? Again, because we also know when we go from an IFT to an IFC set, we may only see 50 cents on the dollar on those savings. So how can we get ahead by using technology as our friend in an industry where we build buildings by hand? How can we actually use the sophistication of the tech industry to help improve that? Just on the contingency aspect, a key one for me is how we want to try to quantify what contingencies our GCs are putting in. How much are they padding those line items? So what is real? What is that real number? And how much are we seeing from a contingency get passed up into our number? So do we have a contingency on a contingency? We want to know that to try to just get a better handle of our information and our numbers.
Yeah,
Padding is such a dirty word.
You know it's true.
You can call it whatever you want, though.
I don't want to be contrary, but back on the scheduled topic, new work we're pricing and budgeting and scheduling, our schedules are not, we're not adding contingencies or added time, because for the most part, we're building it into our schedule that we need to buy a switchgear a year in advance. Our productivity hasn't materially changed. For ongoing projects that got hit mid-project where we would normally buy switchgear 16 weeks in advance, that's where we're being impacted on existing projects. We're building a lot of it into our new jobs because that contingency on contingency on contingency is what's going to kill projects. It will. And we have one job under pre-construction right now where we've taken two approaches with trades to try and get rid of that. One is give us your classic fixed price risk transfer model, done. The other one is give us this indexed price, open book. We'll ride the wave of material, like you say. And it's amazing how much contingency comes out, first of all. The price is lower. There's more risk there. And it's also impressive how many more trades now want to work with you. Because in the current model, people are now getting bitten, and the bid lists and interest in certain risk transfers is not coming. There's enough work out there. They don't need that, so to say. So that open approach is critical, to mitigating and attracting the right people to build.
Yeah.
How are you getting like 3 different peer groups to come in and audit the other guy's work and that seems like a really good solution, but then it also seems like it's...
They don't love doing it. You pay them.
What's that?
You pay them.
Yeah.
They don't love to do it, though, but I would echo that. We've done a few peer reviews. I found them to be pretty useful, and to jump on again, the digital twin has been great. We've been using it quite a bit, and while it doesn't save you money because those conflicts existed already, you find them earlier, and or you're able to then use your contingency on, maybe in the past before you had a digital twin, you would have used that contingency on some of the items the digital twin finds early. You can then use that contingency later on some of these new fun issues like supply chain and things that weren't an issue 5 or 6 years ago. So we've used the digital twin quite a bit lately, and it's been fantastic.
Sorry,
Digital twin, so you essentially build it down to the finest detail of the drawings, your building digitally, and they find out all the issues that exist with your drawings, so you can address them ahead of time rather than on site with a site instruction or something like that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I hadn't heard that term. I just wanted to move on. So more of a high-profile project for Matt that we were talking about. How is like the permitting process and what you've had to deal with for the Crystal downtown? Like that's an exciting project, and have you felt like the delays of the city have helped with that project given where you're at right now, or is there still is the demand still there for office tenants? We're seeing downtown office is still the burden of vacancy does not seem to appear to be on the brand new stuff. It's going to fall down to the existing stuff. So where do you guys put yourself in that?
Yeah, you told me it was going on spec, I thought, at the start of this
No.
conversation.
I was talking about the one next to Terminal, where the old Party Bazaar used to be.
Oh, so not ours, yeah.
Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
Made a mistake there.
No, that's all good, we'll take it, though.
Yeah, that's a good set.
Yeah, no, and we'll take it because absolutely I do think that there is a lot of life left in the office market, this office boom we're going through right now. I don't think that work from home is really going to kneecap the office market like we thought it was a while ago. Your original question was, has the city's permitting process helped us? And I would say no, it definitely hasn't. It's been a frustrating process, and it's been a learning for me. I've been on that project for 8 years now. We took our initial letter of inquiry into the city 18 years ago. So we've been on that project for a long time. So I think we could have built the building about 5 times over by now, and we'd be happy to have done it every time.
Yeah.
It is still very much an active development project for us, and we're looking forward to it. I think you guys will all hear something from us within the year. But we are working with the city right now, and one thing we're doing, which I think is helping us here and has helped us in a number of projects, is getting out in front of some of the entitlement work that you have to do and some of the engagement work you have to do, and working directly with our neighbors and directly with our stakeholders to understand their vision for the neighborhood and their vision for our particular parking lot, and bring them into the process early. And not only does that endear you to the city, but it also, you'll find that there are actually a lot of stakeholders who are interested in your project and can support your project if you reach out the right way, and if you if you work with them, you may have to make a couple small changes that maybe weren't your first choice, but if they get you across the finish line, especially when you've been at it for 18 years, I'll do pretty much anything at this point to get that thing approved.
Yeah,
I think the biggest problem that I see with municipal delays is that it seems so readily fixable. Everything else that we're talking about here is a complete aberration that could not have been predicted. No one foresaw what was going to happen with COVID. Nobody thought that a run on lumber would happen because of DIY projects. Nobody thought that Evergreen was going to get stuck in a canal. There were these very specific events that caused massive disruptions throughout supply chains that cost us all time. The permitting issue is just a problem that needs to be fixed. The unreliability is such an issue, not anywhere near the visibility of Matt's project, but we have a non-market rental project that we were awarded just shy of 4 years ago, and we haven't broken ground. And so that in and of itself has cost this project tens of millions of dollars in construction costs, let alone what we're seeing on a soft cost that I don't even get to see behind that lens. But then now we're dealing with rising interest rates that might make the project viability a non-starter. And so this project should have been built by now. It should have had tenants in it. And instead we're dealing with whether or not it can even go forward.
So your experience, your firsthand experience, what's your key takeaway of something in a municipality, who's someone sitting here, what could they be doing a bit differently to sort of help with that is one part of the question. And then what, from your experience, could you have done differently to maybe speed that up?
Oh
Just
God,
from
such a
both
loaded
sides.
question.
Yeah, I hear you.
So I'd love there to be accountability across the board. I think that there's an aversion to it in most municipalities for you to know who your plan checker is, what it is that they're doing, when they have a requirement to issue it in a specific time frame. That would all be a very welcome change throughout every municipality. I think that Surrey's tried to do something with that to have these mandated time frames. If that could follow suit throughout all of them, that would be brilliant if they could actually meet them. They've developed different building codes to allow these very stringent approaches. Architects are adverse to put something in that may or may not be met. They're going to get too many comments back. Then there's a second round of comments and a third. It's just a bit of a shattered process.
Yeah.
So as far as what we could do better, I guess that I could just scream louder and show up at somebody's desk. And now that they're letting us back into City Hall, actually go down there and be present. I think that forcing an issue earlier is something that is of paramount importance. We tend to let things slide as an industry. It's just they'll get to it when they get to it, and we accept that. If timeframes aren't met, we should be following up sooner rather than later. And then I do believe that we should be holding municipalities accountable. I don't think that we do it often enough.
So I completely agree with the challenges that we have at City Hall, but I also look at it, we also have to, as an industry, look and be part of the solution at City Hall. And a lot of the times they are dealing with drawings are incomplete. They're not, they are challenged as well. They do have a labor challenge. And so I think this is where we need to work with the municipalities to have further discussions with the federal government and our provincial government of who are those immigrants, who are those 400,000 that are going to be moving to Canada. And as we have seen recently out of last year's stats, a lot of those individuals are actually already living in Canada. They are in the school system of different I would say different genres of education, but I think this is where how can we attract an immigration pool that is going to be in our labor force, be those planners, be those architects. I am nervous for our industry with the provincial government right now is opening up the doors for us to build. We have to now step up to the plate to deliver those homes. And we as an industry have to work together to get there. And that means that we need that labor pool across the spectrum to be able to actually deliver those homes. Otherwise, I am worried for us, where the provincial government is saying, look, we actually got you there. We got you that permit. Why aren't you building? And so we have to work together to solve that issue, and we need that labor. We need that skilled labor, and that is where the feds can step up to the plate here to help us.
What is the biggest threat then that's a subject I wanted to cover. We're running short on time, so let's jump into the labor pool, and it's obviously a depleting commodity right now, if that's the right term. So what is the strategy? Is that pre-screening foreign labor that comes in to sort of match who's coming into job placement? Is that what you're suggesting, or what is your thoughts on strategy for that?
So when I've sat in some of those federal think tank meetings, it's about who are they turning into permanent residents? How are they screening those applications in that immigration process, and how could we see that planner from UBC or the subtrade at BCIT actually be streamlined to become that permanent resident? And so that's how they come into Canada. So how do we create and make that an active knowledge base for the individuals who are exploring Canada as a choice for immigration? And I think that's a key aspect of how we can help solve this issue in 2 to 3 years, so give them time to actually be a skilled labor in this industry.
Craig, sorry?
I see it's sort of two veins. There's the skilled labor side and even the professional side. The professional side is where we're suffering the most right now, whether it's COVID, whether it's people being disconnected because they're not in the office or rethinking life. This is anecdotal, but everyone I've talked to, this is one of the worst years in turnover they've seen. And I'm talking at the professional level. People are leaving not for money, well they are, but people are leaving because they want less accountability, they want greater work-life balance, they want to work from home. We need to find a way to change our culture or make the industry more attractive to people because someone else is doing it better, whether it's Google or Apple. People are leaving, someone quit last year on a very steep curve in their career profile, compensation and everything, shareholder, because they want less accountability, they want to work 9 to 4, so they're going to go work for an elevator consultant. It was a very bizarre conversation, and it's anecdotal, and there's a lot of those conversations happening. So finding a way to make the construction industry more attractive with a better balance on the professional level is our current focus.
Okay. Anyone else on the labor side of things?
I don't know how to solve part of the problem in that I think that a draw away from the Metro Vancouver market is probably that outward migration due to cost of living, and then the draw from these larger projects that will be perhaps less accountability because someone is making more further down the chain. That's going to be tough to combat. Like there's going to be these projects that are happening in Kitimat that are going to pull a lot of people from Metro Vancouver that are able to go away for a few years and make a ton of money. They're able to buy a home. There's going to be someone that wants to move to Courtney or Comox and away from Vancouver because they're able to buy a house. That's going to be a real tough thing to combat for our industry. Regardless of how well we pay, we're in such a position here that it's difficult for us to show that roadmap where somebody's able to get what they're able to achieve immediately in a different location.
But it's at a micro scale too, even within the metro. I mean, getting trades to come across the river is hard enough. You know, we chatted a little bit about this, Andrew. You know, trying to get a trade to come in and work on a downtown project, you're paying a huge premium, and there's just nowhere for someone making, you know, sort of a regular income. It's very difficult to live on the north side of the Fraser right now, and until we build more housing, we can't get that to happen, but they won't come because there's not more housing, so it's kind of a vicious circle, and I think that vicious circle exists on the macro level too. We need more people to build more housing, but we need more housing to house the more people that we need to build more housing, and it's just, it's a catch-22 or a vicious circle or whatever it is.
Chicken and egg.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating. So I think we're going to get there, but it's going to be little steps of adding some more housing, adding some more trades and professionals, adding some more housing, adding some more trades and professionals. And it's not just our industry. You know, this is happening in food and bev. This is happening in a lot of different industries where there are, you know, labor shortages across the board.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we by intention keep our office in Langley because we're able to draw from Chilliwack and Abbotsford and get a very quality employee who is more than happy to come to the 200 interchange. So there's definitely some strategy behind where we put our office. We are running short of time. I was hoping we can get to the game I wanted to play, which was whose fault is it, supply chain, construction costs, or broker? But we're not going to have time for that. That was a joke.
Broker.
Yeah. Broker. But I want to ask you guys two more things. Try and leave on a positive note here. What's your bold predictions for 2023? Is the first part of the question. And then the last part of the question is, what are you guys excited about in 2023?
I don't know if my bold prediction would be a positive. So I don't think that the amount, there was 26,200 and something construction companies currently. I don't think that there will be that many at this time next year.
Yeah, fair enough.
And so I'm interested to see how that plays out. I guess a bold prediction is that The civic election will, here in Vancouver anyways, will hopefully impact some change from a permitting perspective. I think that even if it is the incumbent group that remains in place, they've all recognized that this is of critical importance and something that's a priority. I guess like on a very micro level, the museum in Victoria stalls because it's too expensive. And then as far as excited about 2023, I think that as Byron and Matt both spoke to, the ability to start to look to automate things is going to be important. I think that that's going to have to be in hyperdrive in order to offset all of these obstacles that we're seeing, particularly on the supply chain issue. So it's that live data, real live time, so that you're understanding where your impacts are and how to offset. And I'll be interested to see how some groups make that prevalent throughout the industry.
I guess my bold prediction for 23 is I think we're going to see some cost, not necessarily decreases, but pressure come off. I think there are a couple key items where I think we're going to see maybe not a supply glut, but supply finally catch up with demand. I could be flat out wrong, and nobody will probably remember this by 23, so I can say that. But you know, things like steel, I think we're going to start to see a lot of production ramp up there, and I'm hopeful by the sort of mid to late 23 we might start to see supply really catch up with demand. That's my bold prediction. What am I excited for in 23? Just life to continue to go back to normal. I think you know, we're mostly back to normal, but there's still that lingering feeling of, you know, should I have a mask on in this venue? Should I not? And I'm excited for 23 to hopefully just be, you know, the last 2 years to all be sort of a distant memory that you know, everything's just back fun again.
Greg, finish yourself here.
I have two. So my bold prediction, similar to Bryan, is a little negative on the subcontractor. I see a lot of, I see less of them being around, contractors as well. We see insolvencies on the verge already. I also predict that inside this year, I think before 2023, something's going to come to a head. Something's going to give, because we're seeing it in our procurements now. We're seeing it in budgeting and pro formas and where jobs are standing. And I think it's going to be disproportionate in how it hits the market. The government's still spending like drunken sailors, and that's going to continue, I think, to cause problems. It's the number of mega projects, St. Paul's Hospital, Royal Columbian Hospital, Cowichan Hospital, the new museum, Richmond Hospital, New Surrey Hospital. Like, we're talking about $8 billion that are going to go concurrently over the next 4 years. And they're going to go, that's going to cause this disproportionate impact. I think it's going to prop up some of the cost pressures and staffing pressures and labor pressures we're seeing. And then I think that's going to cause a disproportionate impact negatively in some of the other sectors.
So I would say quickly for myself, excited for is rental. I think rental is going to be we're going to see a major pressure on rental rates, which will facilitate rental projects to go. I think you're going to see it from developers who are backed by institutions. You will see rental projects go. If you're not backed by an institution, I'll be there to buy your site. I'll put it that way. With regards to a bold prediction, I think we're going to see market condo projects stall this year. We're going to see a lack of supply. Interest rates will balance out by the end of this year. Next year, we'll start to see the market come back early again. But we will see, I'd say, a flat line or a decrease in condo prices, but then we'll see a lack of supply again. And next year, we'll start to see launches be quite successful.
That's awesome, guys. Thank you very much for everyone for joining us today. I'll just pass it off to Paul for closing remarks. And well done, gents. That was a really good panel. Thank you.